Since you left your role as ambassador, what do you make of the tactics used by Prime Minister Netanyahu in Gaza, and particularly the last couple of months or so? I kind of choosing my language carefully here. It's been stronger language from the British government, for example, than the US. But do you think that he's crossed a line in terms of using tactics that are too firm, disproportionate, even wrong, or not?
Look, I think the tragedy is that Hamas has been unwilling for a very long time to agree to a path to free the hostages and end the war. When I was ambassador, I spent days and nights, literally every day and every night, worrying about the scope of the war and the ability to feed and shelter people who were displaced in Gaza. I think that from the perspective of our work in the Biden administration, for all that people have criticized that we didn't take a position that became more hostile to Israel, we were singularly responsible for helping to keep 2 million people alive through the work that we did. I think the challenge now is, how do you get to an end of this war where the government of Israel and the leaders of Hamas can reach an agreement? I don't think starving people is the goal of Israel's policy. I think denying Hamas access to control and resources is. But from the moment I got there until now, I've said starving people is something that you have to find a way to avoid. I think they're trying to do that through things like the Gaza Humanitarian Fund. It hasn't so far worked perfectly. It's worked, there's been a lot of violence and challenges, but they have gotten a lot of food in. It's a drop in the bucket in terms of what needs to get into Gaza. There's going to need to be a way to increase humanitarian assistance. But there are two sides to this. There's Hamas that is responsible for some of the violence as well as creating the conditions that have led to this. And I think the world has been too willing to move beyond the cause of the war and the ongoing belligerence of Hamas. With that said, I think that it's in Israel's interest to find a way to feed people, to make sure people can be protected when military operations go on. And when they fail, we have to call that out. But I think the movement in some places to forget who started the war and who has the power to end the war, that's Hamas, is a mistake. Now, the political situation in Israel is not a good one. The things that they say are sometimes worse than the things that they do because they're appealing to a small, right-wing part of their coalition. I think it's a mistake, but, it's hard to tell people not to do the things. It's hard for people to listen to you when you tell them not to do the things that they think are necessary for political survival. I hope that there's an end to this war and a transition to a stable, sustainable future where ultimately there can be a conversation about how do you rebuild Gaza. We're not there yet. Hopefully soon.
So just quickly, the UK government suspending some weapons exports licenses to Israel is short-sighted, is a mistake?
So I can't say that I am familiar with which licenses they've held up. I think I can speak to the United States policy. There was a decision not to send one weapon, 2,000-pound bombs, and it somehow got turned into the public image of an embargo. There was never an embargo. We continued to supply Israel so that it could not just prosecute the war in Gaza, but it did just fine in Lebanon, Syria, and Iran. And they don't appear to be running out of what they need. So I don't know what the government of the UK is doing. I do know that what the government of the United States did under the time I was there was highly mischaracterized.